course, I'd heard all about you through the post office and the Arctic Monthly. In fact, I'd written to you. It was I who contributed those articles on underwater swimming, you remember? The Alaskan Wiggle, you know, double overhand stroke. It was printed in the August number of your magazine. We were awfully sorry when you had to give up the Arctic Monthly. It was tremendously popular among the seals. But what was this trouble you were speaking of? Asked the doctor. Oh yes, said Sophie, bursting into tears again. That just shows you how glad I am. I had forgotten all about it for the moment. You know, when you first came in, I thought you were an ordinary visitor. But the very first word of Sealish that you spoke, and Alaskan Sealish at that, I knew who you were. John Dolittle, the one man in the world I wanted to see. It was too much. Come, said the doctor. Don't break down again. Tell me what your trouble is. When I was sick, they decided I needed company. So they put me in a pond with the other seals until I should recover. Sophie began to weep again, but she pulled herself together and went on. One of the seals who had come from the Bering Straits, as I did, told me that my husband has refused to eat since I was captured and brought here. He used to be the leader of the herd, and now another seal was elected in his place. Poor Slushy, my poor Slushy. Poor who? Asked the doctor. Slushy, said the seal. That's my husband's name. He relied on me for everything, poor, simple Slushy. What shall I do? What shall I do? I ought to go to him. Well now, listen, said John Dolittle. It's not an easy matter to arrange a trip to Alaska. Perhaps I can persuade Mr. Higgins, your keeper, to let you visit Slushy. The doctor thought a minute. He leaned over the railing and spoke in seal language. Cheer up, he said. I'll find a way. Just then a schoolmistress with a band of children entered, accompanied by Higgins, the keeper. As he came in, the doctor went out, smiling to himself. Soon the children were laughing with delight at the antics in the tank, and Higgins decided that Sophie must be feeling entirely recovered, for he had never seen her so sprightly or so full of good spirits. The doctor returned to the caravan and asked Toby, the Punch and Judy dog, Does Sophie belong to Blossom or to Higgins? To Higgins, doctor, said the little dog. He does something the same as you do. In return for letting the seal perform in the big ring, Higgins gets his stand in the circus free and pockets whatever money he makes on her as a sideshow. Well, that isn't the same as me at all, said the doctor. The big difference is that the push-me-pull-you is here of his own accord, and Sophie is kept against her will. It is a perfect scandal that hunters can go up to the Arctic and capture any animals they like, breaking up families and upsetting herd government and community life in this way. A crying shame. Toby, how much does a seal cost? They vary in price, doctor, said Toby, but I heard Sophie say that when Higgins bought her in Liverpool from the men who had caught her, he paid £20 for her. She had been trained on the ship to do tricks before she landed. How much have we got in the money box, Tutu? Asked the doctor. All of last week's gate money, said the owl, except 1 shilling and 3p. The 3p you spent to get your hair cut, and the shilling went on celery for Gub-Gub. Well, what does that bring the total to? Tutu, the mathematician, cocked his head on one side and closed his left eye, as he always did when calculating. £2 7 shillings, he murmured, minus 1 shilling and 3p leaves £2 5 shillings and 9p, cash in hand net. Good Lord, groaned the doctor, barely enough to buy 1/10 of Sophie. I wonder if there's anyone I could borrow from. That's the only good thing about being a doctor. When I had a practice, I could borrow from my patients. If I remember rightly, muttered Dab-Dab, it was more often your patients that borrowed from you. Blossom wouldn't let you buy her, even if you had the money, said Swizzle. Higgins is under contract, made a promise, to travel with the circus for a year. Very well then, said the doctor. There's only one thing to be done. That seal doesn't belong to those men anyhow. She's a free citizen of the Arctic Circle, and if she wants to go back there, back she shall go. Sophie must escape. Planning the escape. Although the plans for Sophie's escape were, of course, kept a strict secret from any of the people in Blossom's establishment, The animals of the circus soon got to know them through Jip, Toby and Swizzle. The plan was for the doctor to leave the circus a few days ahead of Sophie so that Blossom would not connect her escape with the doctor. In this way no one would be searching for John Dolittle but would simply be giving chase to an escaped seal. When the doctor returned from announcing to the manager that he was about to leave the circus on business, he found the animals seated about the table in the caravan talking in whispers. "Well, doctor," said Matthew, who was sitting on the steps, "did you speak to the boss?" "Yes," said the doctor, "I told him it's all right. I'm leaving tonight. I felt frightfully guilty and underhanded. I do wish I could do this openly." "You'd stand a fat chance of succeeding if you did," said Matthew. "I don't feel guilty at all." "Listen, doctor," said Jip, "let me know if there's anything I can do to help. When is Sophie going to get away?" "The day after tomorrow," said John Dolittle. "Matthew here will undo the door of her stand just after closing time. But listen, Matthew, you'll have to be awfully careful no one sees you tinkering with the lock. If we should get caught, we would indeed be in a bad fix then. Tinkering with locks makes it a felony instead of a misdemeanour or something like that. Do be careful, won't you?" "You can rely on me, doctor," said the cat's meat man proudly, puffing out his chest. "I've got a way of me own with locks, I have. No force, sort of persuasion like." "Get clear out of the way as soon as you have let her free," said the doctor, "so you won't be connected with it at all. Dear me, how like a low-down conspiracy it sounds." "Sounds like lots of fun to me," said Matthew. "To me too," said Jip. "It'll be the best trick that's been done in this show for a long while," put in Swizzle. "Ladies and gentlemen, John Dolittle, the world-famous conjurer, will now make a live seal disappear from the stage before your eyes. Abracadabra, mumble and jabber, hoopla, hey presto, gone." And Swizzle stood on his hind legs and bowed to an imaginary audience behind the stove. "Well," said the doctor, "even though it sounds underhanded, I don't feel I'm doing anything wrong, myself. They've no right to keep Sophie in this slavery. How would you like it," he asked of Matthew, "to be made to dive for fish into a tub of dirty water for the amusement of loafers?" "Rotten," said Matthew. "I never did care for fish, nor water neither. But look here, have you arranged with Sophie where she's to meet you?" "Yes," said John Dolittle, "as soon as she gets clear of the circus enclosure. And don't forget, we're relying on you to leave the back gate open as well as Sophie's own door. As soon as she's out of the fence, she's to cross the road where she'll find an empty house. Alongside of that there is a little dark passage, and in that passage I will be waiting for her. My goodness, I do hope everything goes right. It's so dreadfully important for her and her husband in Alaska too." "And what are you going to do then?" asked Matthew, "when she's got as far as the passage?" "Well, it's no use trying to plan too far as to detail. My general idea is to make for the Bristol Channel. That's about our shortest cut to the sea from here. Once there, she's all right, but it's nearly 100 miles as the crow flies, and we'll have to keep concealed most of the way. I'm not expecting an easy journey. However, there's no sense in meeting your troubles halfway. I've no doubt we shall get along all right once she's safely away from the circus." So that night, after a final talk with Sophie, he set out alone, on business. He took with him most of what money he had, leaving a little with Matthew to pay for the small needs of his establishment while he was away. His business, as a matter of fact, did not take him farther than the next town, which journey he made by a stagecoach. On his arrival at the next town, he took a room in an inn and remained there the whole time. 2 nights later, he returned to Ashby after dark, and entering the town from the far side, made his way through unfrequented streets till he reached the passage which was to be his meeting place with Sophie. In the deserted garden. In spite of everything that Theodosia, Matthew's wife, could do to distract the night watchman while the cat's meat man unlocked Sophie's stand, she was unable to detain him very long. He took his lamp and left on his rounds. Higgins, who had been chatting with them, however, remained. It was but a few minutes before the watchman came running back to Matthew's wagon. "Higgins," he yelled, "your seal's gone." "Gone?" cried Higgins. "Gone?" said Theodosia. Can't be possible." "I tell you she has," said the watchman. "Her door's open and she ain't there." "Good heavens," cried Higgins, springing up. "I could swear I locked the door as usual. But if the gate in the fence was still closed, she can't be far away. Come on." And he ran out of the wagon. By this time Matthew had joined them, and he and Theodosia, pretending to be greatly disturbed, followed close behind. They all raced for the seal's stand. "Door's open, sure enough," said Matthew as they came up to it. "How very peculiar." "Let's go inside," said Higgins. "Maybe she's hiding at the bottom of the tank." The watchman raised his lamp and they all peered into the dark water. "Ain't nothing under the water," said Higgins. "Sophie's not here." Meanwhile, John Dolittle, waiting, anxious and impatient in the dark passage, heard to his delight the sound of a peculiar footstep. A flipper step, it should be more properly called, for the noise of Sophie travelling over pavement was a curious mixture between someone slapping the ground with a wet rag and a sack of potatoes being yanked along a floor. "Is that you, Sophie?" he whispered. "Yes," said the seal, hitching herself forward to where the doctor stood. "Thank goodness," he said. "I was afraid you might not get away." "Oh, I got away all right," said Sophie. "Hadn't we better get out of town? It doesn't seem to me very safe here." "There's no chance of that for the present," said the doctor. "The noise they made in the circus has woken everybody. We dare not try and get through the streets now. I just saw a policeman pass across the end of the passage there. Luckily for us, just after you popped into it." "Well, then what are we going to do?" "We'll have to stay here for the present. It would be madness to try and run for it now." "Well, but suppose they come searching in here? We couldn't—" At that moment 2 persons with lanterns stopped at the end of the passage, talked a moment and moved away. "Quite so," whispered the doctor. "This isn't safe either. We must find a better place." Now on one side of this alleyway there was a high stone wall and the other a high brick wall. The brick wall enclosed the back garden belonging to the deserted house. "If we could only get into that old empty house," murmured the doctor, "we'd be safe to stay there as long as we wished, till this excitement at the circus dies down. Can you think of any way you could get over that wall?" The seal measured the height with her eye. 8 feet, she murmured. "I could do it with a ladder. I've been trained to walk up ladders. I do it at the circus, you know. Perhaps—" "Shh," whispered the doctor. "Listen, there's just a chance I might find an orchard ladder in the garden. Now you wait here, lie flat, wait till I come back." Then John Dolittle, a very active man in spite of his round figure, drew back and took a running jump at the wall. His fingers caught the top of it. He hauled himself up, threw one leg over, and dropped lightly down into a flower bed on the other side. At the bottom of the garden he saw in the moonlight what he guessed to be a tool shed. Slipping up to the door, he opened it and went in. He lit a match. And there, sure enough, hanging against the wall right above his head, was an orchard ladder, just the right length. In a moment he'd blown out the match, opened the door, and was marching down the garden with the ladder on his shoulder. Standing it in a firm place, he scaled up and sat astride the wall. Next he pulled the ladder up after him, changed it across to the other side, and lowered the foot end into the passage. Then John Dolittle, perched astride the top of the wall, looking exactly like Humpty Dumpty, whispered down into the dark passage below him. "Now climb up, Sophie. I'll keep this end steady. And when you reach the top, get onto the wall beside me till I change the ladder over to the garden side. Don't get flustered now. Easy does it." It was a good thing that Sophie was so well trained in balancing. Never in the circus had she performed a better trick than she did that night. It was a feat that even a person might well be proud of, but she knew that her freedom, the happiness of her husband, depended on her steadiness. And though she was in constant fear that any minute someone might come down the passage and discover them, it gave her a real thrill to turn the tables on her captors by using the skill they had taught her in this last grand performance to escape them. Firmly, rung by rung, she began hoisting her heavy body upward. The ladder, fortunately, was longer than the height of the wall. Thus the doctor had been able to set it at an easier, flattish slope instead of straight upright. With the seal's weight, it sagged dangerously, and the doctor on the wall prayed that it would prove strong enough. Being an orchard ladder for tree pruning, it got very narrow at the top, and it was here, where there was hardly room enough for a seal's 2 front flappers to take hold, that the ticklish part of the feet came in. Then, from this awkward situation, Sophie had to shift her clumsy bulk onto the wall, which was no more than 12 inches wide, while the doctor changed the ladder. But in the circus, Sophie had been trained to balance herself on small spaces, as well as to climb ladders, and after the doctor had helped her by leaning down and hoisting her up by the slack of her sealskin jacket, she wiggled herself along the top of the wall beside him and kept her balance as easily as though it were nothing at all. Then, while Sophie gave a fine imitation of a statue in the moonlight, the doctor hauled the ladder up after her, swung it over, knocking his own high hat off in the process, and lowered it into the garden once more. Coming down, Sophie did another of her show tricks. She laid herself across the ladder and slid to the bottom. It was quicker than climbing. "Do you think we'll be able to get away soon, Doctor?" asked Sophie. "I'm anxious to get started." "I hope so," said the doctor, "but we must wait until things quiet down. Try and be patient." About half an hour later, the doctor took the ladder, and mounting near the top of the garden wall, he listened long and carefully. "There is still an awful lot of people moving about in the streets," he said, "but whether they are circus men hunting you or just ordinary townsfolk walking abroad, I can't make out. We'd better wait a while longer, I think." "Oh dear," sighed Sophie. "Are we never going to get farther than this garden? Poor Slushy, I'm so worried," and she began to weep softly. After another hour had gone by, the doctor went out again. This time, just as he was about to climb the ladder, he heard Jip whispering to him on the other side of the wall. "Doctor, are you there?" "Yes, what is it?" "Listen, Higgins and the boss have gone off somewhere with a wagon. Blossom just came and told Matthew to take on some extra jobs with the circus because he wouldn't be back for a while. Tutu thinks it's a grand chance for you to make a dash for it and get out of the town. Have you got that?" "Yes, I heard you. Thank you, Jip. All right. We'll leave in 15 minutes. And the doctor looked at his watch. "Which way did Blossom go?" "East, towards Grimbledon. Swizzle followed them out a way and came back and told us. You make for the west. Can you hear me?" "Yes, I understand," whispered the doctor. Then he told Sophie to be ready. "Now listen," said the doctor. "If we meet anyone on the street, and we're pretty sure to, you lie down by the wall and pretend you're a sack I'm carrying, that I'm taking a rest, you see. Try and look as much like a sack as you can. Understand?" "All right," said Sophie. "I'm frightfully excited. See how my flippers are fluttering." Well, the doctor kept an eye on his watch, and long before the minutes had passed, he and Sophie were waiting at the foot of the ladder, ready and impatient. Finally, after looking at the time once more, the doctor whispered, "All right, I think we can start now. Let me go first, so I can steady the ladder for you the way I did before." But alas for poor Sophie's hopes. Just as the doctor was halfway up, the noise of distant barking, deep-voiced and angry, broke out. John Dolittle paused on the ladder, frowning. The barking, many dogs baying together, drew nearer. "What's that?" said Sophie, in a tremulous whisper from below. "That's not Jip or any of our dogs." "No," said the doctor, climbing down slowly. "There's no mistaking that sound. Sophie, something's gone wrong. That's the baying of bloodhounds. Bloodhounds on a scent, and they're coming this way."